All right, welcome to this episode of Ascension with A Course in Miracles. I am Laina Orlando, and today we are going to be recording episode 189 on March the 19th, 2025. And for the first time ever, all of these episodes, going on almost 200 episodes, I am having technical difficulties, meaning I cannot just show only me in this recording. So you're going to see some of the images of people who are with me live. So thank you for those of you who are with me live. That it's fun to have you here. So let's just jump in because we've spent the last couple of minutes trying to figure this out. And we're running about 20 minutes later than normal, trying to see if we could do a little reset, but I'll call Zoom and we'll get it fixed pretty quickly. All right. So we have been for the last couple of times that we have gathered since episode 187, then last week 188, and then this week 189. We are in chapter 3 of A Course in Miracles, which is what we always look at. Chapter 3 in the text. And we are in section number 6. The title of section number 6 is Judgment and the Authority Problem. And we'll welcome our sweet friend here. Thanks for joining us, Dondra. And we're keeping everybody's camera off. So we are in chapter 6, Judgment and the Authority Problem. Now, this is one, to me, everything about the Course in Miracles is important, but this particular section, it is so important that we understand this because to me, this is one of the sections of the Course that help me not only really understand my spiritualized ego, and by the way, that's going to be the trap for everybody that wants to move into full ascension, into complete oneness with God, into the remembering that God is the ultimate authority, the creator of our reality. Until we truly yield to God, we are still trying to control things. And we have to recognize that the ego that begins to be trained in spiritual knowledge thinks it knows everything because it's spiritual. That's what the spiritual ego is all about. Those of you who have been with me as we did a study of the book, The Way of Mastery, it spells it out clearly and it says the spiritual ego is the last egg to be cracked because when the ego knows that we are an expression of God, it thinks it is God. It thinks it is the one that knows everything. And while we're believing the ego, because the ego it shows up as thoughts in our mind and beliefs that we hold as the truth of who we are. So when we begin to move into that place of judgment, I know better than God, then we are really blocking God. So the last couple of weeks, I'm going to give you the highlights of the chapters, not chapters, but the paragraphs that we've been looking at, because in paragraph number 1, it says, this is in sentence number 4. When the Bible says, judge not that ye be not judged, it means that if you judge the reality of others, you will be unable to avoid judging your own. So whenever we have a judgment about somebody else, we are assuming that we know better. And whatever we judge about another person, I'm right and they're wrong. Whatever you think they're wrong about is the ego projecting on the other what you don't want to look at within yourself. And this is paramount that we understand the trickery of the ego mind. The Course is really clear. In the introduction, it tells us that we cannot interpret what the Course is saying. We can take what we can handle at any one given moment. And if we're not prepared, and this is why honesty is an important characteristic of a teacher of God, it's one of the 10 characteristics that shows somebody who has awakened in the dream, someone who really is walking the talk, is radical honesty. Do you still think you're right about something? Do you still believe you know better than something that is happening? Because that means you're not in acceptance. And if you're not in acceptance, you're in judgment. This is the way it works. And of course, like any other wonderful teachings, especially spiritual teachings that are attempting to get us to surrender our will to God's will for us, because God only wills good things for us. The ego wills from a place of selfishness, of greed, of smallness, protection, thinking that we're small and then there's the big bad world out there. As long as the ego assumes it is thinking that it knows better, we actually do not know what we're talking about. So let me read another one of these sentences because this is so important. Paragraph number 2. The choice to judge rather than to know is the cause of the loss of peace. So if we are losing our serenity, we're judging something and we don't like it and we're upset with it, we have just given up. It's the cause of the loss of our peace. If you cannot remain at peace and observe something, please know that that is your signal that the ego's involved. The ego thinks it knows better. And that is the only thing that's going to block God, is going to block the truth of who we are. Then in that same paragraph number 2, sentence number 4 says, judgment always involves rejection. Every time we judge, we are rejecting God's truth. We're rejecting to see the truth of what's happening, not the facts of what is. Because in this world that the ego has made, we can point at a lot of facts and say, that's true, that's true, that's true. And it is true in the smaller, in the small picture of things in this world. We can point at things and say, these are the facts. Absolutely accurate in the third dimensional world. If you do not want to ascend to the fifth dimension, meaning you want to stay righteous in the 3D world, then continue to judge and have at it. But to move to the fifth dimension, we have to really practice not knowing what anything is for. Moving to the place that we are replacing what I think is true and right and accurate, regardless of the facts, and allowing God's will to inform us. Because that is when we can be part of the shift, part of the change that humanity is in the middle of. And that is to allow ourselves to see things through the eyes of God. And God only has one purpose for us. One ultimate uh, desire is for us to be happy. And the only way that we're going to be happy is, and this is evident when you see little children, is they're in a constant state of creation. The imagination is active, and the imagination is bringing about new ideas, and wonderful new things can come into our realization. But while we judge and think we know, we cannot be open to the more that is possible. We cannot be open to the new that wants to enter. So that is a very important point. Again, sentence number 4 in paragraph 2, judgment always involves rejection. Always involves rejecting the truth of who we are, the truth of who anybody is. Then last week, we started with that particular sentence, and then we went on to look at sentence number 6. What has been perceived and rejected or judged and found wanting remains in your mind because it has been perceived. The importance of that statement is if you are thinking something is good, something is bad, according to the ego, it stays in your mind. And when you perceive something you don't like, you're going to keep creating more of that. Why? Because to experience the miracle, you have to change your mind about it. A miracle is a shift in perception. If you keep pointing at, I don't like this is bad. So examples from my own life, the job is bad, the weather is bad, the husband's not doing the right thing. I kept reliving those things because when we are pointing out what we don't like, we're saying, that is my truth. That is my reality. Remember, we're creators first and foremost. We create through projection. Perception makes the projection. So if I perceive that this is bad, I am going to project more of that into my reality. And what is so important to understand about that statement is that it applies to the good, to the positive, and to the negative. If you make a decision to, instead of judging the weather or judging the spouse or judging, the current affairs, you move to the place of acceptance. It is what it is. You immediately pull the ego out. Now God has a way to come in. Imagination gets activated, inspiration. And how do you know you're listening to God? You feel peace. You're at peace because you're no longer judging what is. That is the fastest way to recognize if you are allowing God to inform you is because you feel peace. At peace, you're not trying to change what is. The body feels relaxed. You are expanded. You're in a state of open possibilities. When the ego is in righteousness, it's ready to attack and get its point across. This is why the ego defends things. This is why the Course teaches us another characteristic of a teacher of God, of somebody who walks the talk, besides honesty, is defenselessness. In our defenselessness, our safety lies. Because when we're not defending, we are saying, I really don't know what anything is for. Walking the talk, if I don't know what anything is for, that means my ego doesn't know what anything is for. Now, instead of being in a place of judgment and rejecting who I really am, rejecting God, I am in a place of peace, of ease. Now I am open to God's will flow through me. And God wills for everything to be happy. And when we look at the 3D world and we are looking at things and we don't like what we don't like, and that's perfectly okay because that's how we gain the contrast. I don't like this, I prefer this. But what we are learning as masters of our own reality, those who are taking 100% responsibility for the power of our mind, what we are doing as masters of our own reality is we're moving from the edges of rights and wrongs and moving into the middle. Because when we are on the edges, we are swinging, the ego has a swinging like a pendulum. Oh, we like it? No, we don't like it. And if you look at the pendulum this way from left to right, kind of gives you an idea of how unstable we are. But when you flip that pendulum and you look at it how the ego operates, seeking the high and dropping into the low like an addict. Oh, I've got to be righteous. Oh no, I'm wrong and I'm victimized. Oh, I've got to be righteous and a bully and get my point across. No, it feels really bad to be wrong. So the ego always seeks the high, always avoiding the low, but you can't avoid the low. If you're always going up, you're going to come down. Those are laws in the third dimensional world. So when you look at the ego as unstable, always swinging up and down, if you want to look at it that way, we're seeking to come to the middle. When we rest in the middle, then the pendulum is not swinging. We're not unstable. Because when you go one way, then you're going to have to come back the other way. That's just the way that it is in this planet, cause and effect. You're going to be swinging. When we are grounded in the middle, because we have made the decision not to argue with the Course. We are accepting what the Course says, and then we're just doing our very best to apply it. Instead of the ego arguing, oh, this can't possibly be right. I feel that what happened is wrong, and I am right about that. If you begin to override the ego and say, you know what, I don't need to be right about anything. I want to feel peace, because when I am at peace, then I can hear inspiration that begins to activate the imagination for what it is that I prefer. Because so if I want a better relationship with my partner, which I don't have one now, but back then, in those days, instead of focusing on what the partner was doing wrong and getting more of that, because as a creator of my reality, my perception is being projected in front of me. If I wanted something to be different, then I needed to accept it is what it is. They're doing what they're doing. What do I prefer instead? Now, as we move towards being masters of our reality, We need to understand that God said we are made in its image and God is a creator, meaning we were created to create. Let me say that again. We were created to create. What humanity does not understand, because we have been programmed not to understand this, is that our mind creates our reality. Our thoughts create our reality. If you want what is happening to change, you must see it as that being your reality first and foremost. And then feel the peace that comes from that. Feel the peace of having the world be the way you want it to be. Feel the peace of having the relationships, the financial systems, the medical systems, the education systems. Spend time visualizing what you want. Because when you want it, not because you think that's the right thing, because you don't like what you saw over here, not that way. Because when you're trying to project from judgment, you're just going to get more of what you judged to have to look at. When you are projecting through a perception of peace, you are so much more powerful. Not only that, we're moving, whether we understand this or not, we're moving to a fifth dimensional way of being. Meaning there are millions of people on this planet who have achieved a level of consciousness that is practicing the teachings of the Course. You can go to YouTube and Google A Course in Miracles. You're going to get hundreds of Course in Miracles teachers who are sharing what they're discovering. And the reason they share what they're discovering is because it changes everything. And if we want to change the world that we see, we have to first become the change. I think that's been attributed to Gandhi, but that's been said for way longer than the time of Gandhi. We have to become the change. You want peace out there, you have to be peace in here. You want happiness out there and transparency out there, you have to become happy and become transparent. Be willing to practice the characteristic of honesty. Be an open book. There's nothing to hide. In here, you're going to be co-creating the world where there's nothing to hide out there. So when we look at the continuation of that paragraph, whatever has been perceived and rejected remains in your mind, just as much as what has been perceived and accepted remains in our mind. Sentence number 10 says, in the end, it does not matter whether your judgment is right or wrong. I mean, think about that. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. Either way, you're placing your belief in the unreal. One of the most difficult things about the Course in Miracles, I know it because I've experienced this, is recognizing that this world that we appear to be inside of is ultimately not solid. It is completely made of energy. It appears solid because we're projecting what we are perceiving. Listen to how important that is. If your mind gets trained to think with God, to think that you're the creator of your reality, to believe it, not to think it, just to believe it, to understand it, to believe it, to experience it, and your purpose is to be happy, and you begin to perceive a world where everything is wonderful, where all beings are free, where all beings are happy, where all beings are peaceful, where everything is operating for the greater good of all, you literally are going to be creating that experience for yourself, because nothing out there is real in that it showed up on its own. It is only there because we have projected it there to have this 3D experience. Well, part of awakening and ascending is to accept that we're the creators of our reality. So if we want a different experience, because it's not real, it's pliable, it's energy, and that energy only takes shape because we believe that it is so, we have to change what we're perceiving. We then have to project out there. Perception creates projection. We have to project out there the world that we prefer. That's why Course in Miracles is a course in mind training. When you are in charge of your mind, you will be projecting the world of peace, of love, of joy, the new earth, everything that you want. but you cannot see the world that you prefer while you're pointing at what you don't like. Because when we point at what we don't like, we're putting the power of our creative mind to make that into our reality. So the energy becomes that thing that gives us that expression. Now, I know a lot of people will say, but Lina, the 3D world and wars and famine and thieves and burning Teslas and corrupt governments. Yes, we are observing that. And the Course in Miracles doesn't tell us to deny what we're observing, but the Course in Miracles says, deny that it has power over you. So when you see something you don't like, the judgment that we have on it gives it power over us. The denial that it has power means I'm taking responsibility for the powers here. What do I prefer instead? This is where, for me, my practice, I have it on my phone. It's my reminder, has been like that for years. It used to be several times a day. Now it happens automatically for me throughout the day. But in the evening, I do not go to sleep without recognizing what world do I want to experience. And then I activate that power that comes from within my heart chakra. I send light and I see the world exactly as I prefer it. And in the seeing the world exactly as I prefer it, I see evidence of the goodness that is already happening because I'm not the only one who is here working to shift the world into one that is beautiful, that is the vibration of the fifth dimensional world, because the 5D world doesn't happen out there. The 5D world is in here. I have to lift my perception and see it from the highest place. And if I am not seeing it with loving eyes, I am then looking at it with my ego, judging it, and then the ego is telling me, well, I'm spiritual, so I'm right, which is one of the biggest trickeries of the ego. Again, I know it because I see that in me. So then we went on to see that it doesn't matter. You can label it good or bad. If you want to use the ego's way of right and wrong and you're going to be on this pendulum swinging, it's okay because ultimately your thoughts about the world do not have to affect me in my experience. My thoughts about the world do not have to affect you. This is why, even though we appear to be in this world where we are a collective of beings, each one of us is actually the creator of our own personal experience. This is why when people are in the lower frequencies defending and attacking, they're at each other. They think that they have to defend themselves and we don't like what Elon is doing, so we're going to burn his cars, or we don't like what Jesus is talking about, so we're going to crucify him. That is the game in the third dimensional world. Those who are ascending know that in our defenselessness our safety lies. And Jesus knew, I'm not going to defend myself. These people don't understand what I'm talking about. I'm just going to forgive them. And if they want to crucify me, that's okay, because my body is not real. Jesus knew that he was not in a world that is solid. He knew he's in a world that is created by projection. And projection comes from perception. And he knew that he is perceiving a world of people just need to be forgiven. They're calling for love. They don't understand what's going on. When you practice looking at everything out there from that Christ vision, through that Christ vision, and you realize nobody knows what they're doing. I certainly didn't when I let my ego run the show. But I now know that I was created by God as a creator of my reality to believe that I deserve what it is that God says I deserve, that I'm entitled to the miracles, that I'm entitled to being happy. And my happiness is totally given up when I start judging. That's why judgment always involves rejection. I'm rejecting my happiness by the need to be right about what it is that I am perceiving. So when we look at this, either way, you can place your beliefs in the right side or the wrong side. It doesn't really matter. It really doesn't matter because there's no solid matter out there. There's just a perception of it. And of course, that's proven by quantum physics, that everything is a wave, but yet when you start looking at something, it turns into a particle. That scientific study has been done so many times. If you are prepared to move to the level of acceptance that everything is energy, then the process of accepting that you're the creator of your reality becomes easier. But while we are believing that we are right, we cannot alter reality. We are just replicating it like a Xerox machine hitting, whoops, copy, copy, copy. The same thing, the same thing, the same thing. If we want to get out of the same thing, you've got to pull back and stop funding it, stop fueling it, stop projecting it. So in paragraph number 3, it says, you have no idea of the tremendous release and deep peace that comes from meeting yourself and your brothers totally without judgment. The tremendous peace that we feel, we release them from being responsible for how we feel. We assume responsibility for how we feel. Now we can see everybody as the innocent child of God that they are. That's why this section is titled Judgment and the Authority Problem. The authority problem is that the ego thinks it knows better, especially when it gets spiritualized. But when we override the ego's thinking, the ego's perceptions, and we want to know God's perceptions, we're going to the authority. We stop judging and we say, God, what do you see? I want to see what you see, God. And Jesus gives us an entire Course in Miracles book, a very thick book to help us train our mind to see the world the way God sees it. And God's the authority. Why is God the authority? Because God is the author, author of who we are. So let's go to the one who wrote the story of who we are. So, sentence number 2, when you recognize what you are and what your brothers are, all written here by God as expressions of love, you will realize that judging them in any way is without meaning. Because you can judge, any one of us can judge another, and it doesn't alter their meaning according to God. That is what the ego wants us to do, to live in separation, thinking we know better than others, judging and feeling righteous so we can get the hit of that addictive need to be right. When we begin to really move into the place that recognizes we're all created by God, authored by God. God wrote us all into this story, gave us all the ability to be in the story and create our own story within the story. So there's the story of the world and the story of the cosmos. And inside of that, there's the story of this planet and in this 3D experience, which is where we think that we're separate from one another because we see bodies. That means that we cannot possibly understand what is really happening here. We are not fully in complete acceptance that everything is energy because we've been thought into existence. Thought, God created us to create. So we're constantly changing what we experience, meaning this is pliable, this is changeable. If it was solid, we couldn't change it. So if it's changing, it's because it's not solid. And if it's not solid, what is it? It's energy, energy that we are projecting. And those who project energy from a low frequency experience the third dimension and get projected back as their reality, what they're projecting out there, a world of separation, mean people, bad people, haves, have-nots, lies, cheaters, all of that stuff. But as we begin to ascend and look at things the way God sees them, and it takes time. Course in Miracles says it will take time to undo what got created over time. Accepting that this is a world that has been created over what appears to be thousands of years brings us to this now moment where we get to say, well, then what do I want to create instead? When it's no longer to change what is out there, but rather to accept that I am the change I want to see, and I become the loving, kind, patient, compassionate, transparent, truth-telling person, then I don't need to judge what I see out there because that would go against what I said I wanted to experience. So that's why the honesty is such an important part of this process of ascension. So I'm going to read this again. Whatever we're projecting out there, really, as it says in here, has no meaning because everybody's meaning comes from God. And if God says that you're innocent, if God says that you're holy, magnificent, perfect, complete, then you are. And if anybody sees you as less than that, is because they're projecting onto you what they haven't healed within themselves. That's why we're training our mind to accept what even in the course is spoken about as sin. Sin is nothing more than a term in Greek. It's an archery term, meaning to miss the mark. So in archery, if you don't hit the bullseye, you miss the mark. So when we sin, we're missing the mark. Instead of seeing our brothers and sisters as God created them, innocent, holy, perfect, and complete, we miss the mark. We're seeing them as my ego wants to see them, not how God's sees them, which is the bullseye. So many of us are sinning. We're missing the mark. We're seeing things from all kinds of different interpretations granted from our own personal life experiences. And that's what happens in the 3D world. We have to get clear. The 3D world informs us. Our ego is created by taking in information from the outer world. The 5D way of perceiving things is because I'm seeing it from the inside out. I'm seeing it through the eyes of God. If I'm not seeing everything through the eyes of God, I'm somewhere between the third dimension of looking at things and the fifth dimension. Honesty means we have to recognize what step am I on? Where am I on that process? And judgment is one of the ways as we advance on this journey of seeing I'm missing the mark. I'm sinning here. And again, it's not the Catholic sin that I grew up, with, that it's something wrong with me. It's the sin that the Course in Miracles is teaching me. There's something wrong with the way I'm looking at. There's my right mind and my wrong mind. And it's not a good or bad thing. It's just if I'm looking at it with my wrong mind, I'm going to experience the world out there based on what's wounded in here. If I'm perceiving with my right mind, I'm looking at the world out there based on what's healed within me. That's the difference between the third dimension, which is a world of suffering because there's suffering in here, versus the fifth dimension, a world at peace because there's peace within and it gets projected out there. We have to be super honest. We cannot advance if we're not honest. If we don't recognize I'm on this step and our spiritualized ego says, well, I'm up here, then we can't make that change because we are comfortable here thinking we're here instead of being honest and accepting I'm here. Okay, what do I need to do to get there? If I know I want to experience total liberation, what do I need to get there? Well, the only way to get there is to accept that you're already free to think whatever you want to think. And in the recognition that you're already free to believe whatever you want to believe, your belief create where you're at, then all that there's left to do when you accept, oh, I am free to experience whatever I want. Stop judging if you want to experience peace and freedom. The judgment is what then gives you the feedback of what you have projected out there, and it lets you be righteous. You know better than the ones out there. So then go to sentence number 3 in paragraph 3. In fact, their meaning, the essence of the meaning of each being as God intends their meaning to be. In fact, their meaning is lost to you precisely because you're judging them. We cannot see the goodness of our brothers and sisters because of our judgments. And if we want to see the goodness of our brothers and sisters, is because we're seeing from the goodness within us. We have compassion. They don't know what they're doing in this 3D world. And the Course in Miracles is telling us we're waking up in the dream. We first wake up in the third dimension. We see clearly what's going on. We see the game of indoctrination. We see the game of reincarnation. We see the contracts that people have. And we can see what's happening as an observer of the play that is taking place before us. We bought a ticket. When we incarnated, we said, I want to go down there and I want to watch that show. As a matter of fact, I want to be in the show. Awakening is I'm going to watch the show. Instead of feeding the drama, instead of judging and continuing to talk about what's wrong with it, and instead of thinking I know better, I pull back and I say, God, you show me the way. You train my mind so that I can perceive correctly, so that I can perceive without illusion. When we then begin to see our brothers and sisters, as God said, everyone is the light of the world. Either they are shining their light or it's been covered up. Well, if it's covered up, it's because they've been indoctrinated. They've been believing that the outer world, the information the outer world gave them is true. So they're playing their roles with that limitation. Although within them is the power to create. So they're creating because they believe their limitation. They're creating their experience as a victim because they believe that they're a victim. And we're not going to help anybody by seeing them as victims. We're only going to help people by holding the truth that they're powerful creators, creating the experience of victimization. Again, I know that is so hard to hear when we are in this level and we're pointing at bullies and victims. I get it. I've been there. That is so intoxicatingly addictive to label people victims and bullies. If you want to remain in the third dimension, then don't stop what you're doing. But if you want to ascend, if you want to move and be able to be part of the co-creation of a world with other souls who have decided I want to see the world. I want to be the change I want to see in the world. And they begin to create that inner shift and begin to raise their frequency and begin to be in this world, but not of it. Then we are coming together because our vibration is drawing us together like attracts like. And from that place, we know everyone that is in the fifth dimension knows that my thoughts create my reality. That's why there's no blame of anybody else. And that's why you can't judge somebody else. We're all creating a reality. But what we do is we remind each other. If for a minute you begin to think wrongly, you begin to judge, oh, they have power, then we all remind each other, wait a second. You are the creator of your reality because we all understand that that's how we get into that playground. The playground called Earth is we come in third dimension, we come in and enter into separation immediately, and you're labeled victim or bully. That's it. If you want to be a co creator in a high frequency, you must accept the power of your mind. You must accept the power that is coming from within you. This is why the kingdom of heaven is within. God, the creator, is within us because God is the energy with which we create, the intelligent energy with which we create. When we accept that God's not on a cloud out there somewhere saying, I'm a sinner and I'm not measuring up, and I accept that God is within me, and my understanding of God is reflective of the measure of the responsibility that I'm taking for what I'm creating, it's a totally different game. Totally different game. You cannot get out of the 3D illusion and game of separation and pain and suffering until you accept to wake up in the game and realize there's nobody to blame. I came in to do this. Now you sit as the observer of it. Now, what do you want instead? Course in Miracles is teaching us how to create a happy dream, to be happy in the world, to have happy people to co-create with. You got to get happy first. And how do you get happy? Stop blaming. Stop blaming, because when you're blaming, you feel tight and tense and you're mad and angry. Well, you got some cleaning up to do inside. It's not that out there that's making you unhappy. It's that you're perceiving it from your own unhappy place. So the work has to be internal. So, sentence three, I'm going to say that again. In fact, their meaning, the meaning that God gave them, is lost to you in the 3D world precisely because you are judging them. All uncertainty comes from the belief that you are under the coercion of judgment. All uncertainty comes from the belief that you are under the coercion of judgment, meaning that you're believing your ego's telling you, yeah, that's bad. And you're deciding, well, no, I see it, it's bad, so then it has to be bad. Well, you're under the coercion of your ego. Your ego, albeit spiritualized, and knows what's better for the world. Everybody should be loving, and that's not loving, so therefore that's wrong. It's a step on the journey to living in love, but it is not loving to judge another. and to call them not loving. Because if you're calling them not loving, you're the one who's not loving on them. Let me go back to paragraph 2, sentence number 4. Judgment always involves rejection. If you're judging them, you're rejecting the meaning God gave them. If you're judging them, you're rejecting your meaning. Your meaning is that you're loving. And love, as the Course has taught us, unconditional love means there's no condition. I'm going to love you no matter what. So I can't stop to judge you and say, well, I'm going to withhold love. And do not try and kid yourself. Every judgment is a block to love. Every judgment creates separation. I know better than you. And in that separation, we block love. And that is the direct result of being separated from our true nature. We have a distance between who we are and how we're showing up in the world. Why? Because our judgments always involve the rejection of who we are by projecting it onto another. They're the bad ones, not me. And it's not that we're bad and they're bad, is that either we remember the truth of who we are and we are experiencing that fifth dimension, or we know the truth of who we are, but we're not experiencing that third dimension. So then it goes on to say, sentence number 5, paragraph 3, you do not need judgment to organize your life, and you certainly don't need it to organize yourself. In the presence of knowledge, all judgment is automatically suspended. And this is the process that enables recognition to replace perception. We perceive the world according to what we've been taught by the world. This is the ego's playground. We then begin to perceive the world through the eyes of God when we begin to experience the recognition of the truth. And we cannot recognize our brothers and sisters as the holy, innocent beings that they are until we have accepted our holiness and our innocence. And if we're judging somebody else, what they're doing is wrong, is bad, is shouldn't be done, is because somewhere you have not recognized your own perfection, your own innocence. Because if you did, you could only see through those eyes. And that means that the work is to look at, what am I judging about the other? Are they lying? Well, then I'm lying to myself if I'm judging them because I'm thinking I know better than God does. So I can't judge anybody as a liar anymore because that then becomes a projection from within. Now, I can have discernment and recognize someone who's lying, but instead of judging them a liar, I recognize them a liar, and I see that as a call for love. I see that as an opportunity to say, oh, maybe you don't have all the information. Let me share what I know. Are you interested in hearing how I see that instead? From there, you have permission to begin to share what it is that you have discovered. Everything in the 3D world is because we don't remember the truth. To move out of the 3D world is a process that requires an incredible amount of pride, meaning you feel good about who you are as God created you, and then you begin to have the courage to practice what does that look like? What does defenselessness look like? What does not judging look like? You have the courage to stand for what you know is for the greater good of all. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to appreciate that because the world is not set up that way when we are primarily in a third dimension. But when you begin to have the courage to speak the truth, like Martin Luther King Jr. did, that don't judge people by their color, the color of their skin, rather by their content, the knowledge that is within them. Jesus said, hey, we're all created equal. We don't have to abide by these 600 some odd rules and laws and regulations, but rather let's operate by one, which is love. Love God, love your neighbor, love yourself, love, love, love. Those people were crucified. They were shot. They were, exterminated by the third dimensional density that likes to think that this is real, that there are haves and have-nots. And we have all bought into the story that the ones in power and the ones with most money, they have, they are the ones that we have to all be afraid of. But the thing is that they're the 0.1%. They're afraid that we wake up and realize, wait a second, I'm not giving you my power. My power is mine. And I keep my power when I see you as no different than me. And when we stop seeing the 1% as up here, or the presidents or the rulers or the authorities up here, and we bring them down to where we are all equal, then we understand the meaning of everybody. Then we can't judge them and reject ourselves. Then we can see, okay, you're playing this role. You think you're the president. You think you're the doctor. You think you know better than me. That's the game that we're playing. But in truth, I have just as much access to the all knowingness of God because it's within me. Then we begin to activate discernment. Then we begin to say, okay, the doctor told me this. The president told me this. The boss told me this. The spouse, the child, the grandchild said this. God, what would you have me do with that? Then you come within to the source that really knows the ultimate meaning of everything. And when you humbled yourself, because this is a process of humbling ourselves, and we go into Jesus used to say, go into your closet. And he didn't mean go into a dark room, but go within to the closet within, go into that small space within that only you can fit. And you sit there, and it's typically a dark place because it's not filled with distractions of the world. It's kind of a place where you can contemplate, and you sit there and you wait to hear the guidance about what to do with that thing, what to really believe. You will receive a knowingness. When you feel peace, that's the way to go. When you feel unease, it's telling you, no, that don't do it. Most of us do what the ego tells us, don't do that thing. You shouldn't send that text, and you send it anyways. And then, of course, it was a text written in anger. But the ego said, send it. They need to know, they need to get the lesson. God within takes that text that comes back that you should have listened to. If you would have listened to God, you wouldn't have sent it. You wouldn't need the lesson of having to get a text back. That's a reaction to your ego being defensive or attacking. You wouldn't need to learn that lesson. You would have already known it. But if you sent the text that the ego said, yeah, they need to know what you're thinking, then you have a lesson to learn, which is you listen to the voice of the ego, not the voice of God. Because the voice of God is always, always, always going to take whatever the ego does, and if we allow it, it will guide us back into the center. The ego always takes us to the edges of understanding, which are right and wrong. That's where the ego operates, and God uses everything and brings us back to the middle. That's why every irritation is an invitation to see your ego's motivation. If it pisses you off, ego's involved. If it brings you peace, God's involved. And understanding the difference is to understand the authority problem. We have been trained into believing that God is outside of us, that we're poor little sinners down here, and that only a few people know better than we do, the rabbis or the popes or somebody else knows. So we let the outer world inform us. We're not creating consciously, but we're still creating because we're giving power to their made up stories. To begin to recognize that the ultimate authority is the author of your reality, being God, and it only sees love and compassion and kindness and welcomes all of its children back as prodigal children, doesn't judge them, doesn't ask questions, and yet celebrates the return of every single one of us who comes back to the kingdom. Come back inside, know who you are, and then from within, you change what you project because you project with the light of truth. You project with the light of God, and everything becomes love or a call for love. That is what is going to change the world that you experience because you will have become that change. All of the work happens inside. None of it is going to happen outside first. It's all going to happen inside. And we're right at the time, 2025 through 2030, 2032 at most. This 5 to 7 year window that we have, we are basically deciding, is the ego the authority of my life, or is God the authority of my life? If the ego is your authority, you're just going to continue to make the third dimension real for you. If God is your authority, you're saying, I'm prepared to go to the fifth dimension. And I've said this here at least one time before. I'm going to say it again. My honest interpretation about what's happening as I continue to ascend by becoming neutral and not judging the world that I'm seeing, I prefer to be on the low frequency of the fifth dimension than to be on the high frequency of the third dimension. The high frequency of the third dimension involves anger, righteousness, villains, and victims. I don't want to be at the top of that reality. I'm already at the top of that reality. I've been at the top of that reality. I want to be at the bottom of the fifth dimensional reality. I have humbled myself enough to know that I don't know what that fifth dimension is going to look like when those who are part of that are co-creating from love. I have glimpses of it. I sit at night when I do my prayers for the greater good of all, and I get visions, and sometimes they bring me to tears. They're so beautiful. But I can't say, oh, that's solid because it's all in my imagination, but it will become solid because that's what I'm sending my energy towards. That's what I'm focusing on, the reality I prefer. And in this world that appears to move in time, where everything slows down so we can see things, in seconds and minutes and hours and days, I'm watching the changes happening. And I recognize that if the best that I can be is neutral now, what's going to happen when I really live from love? I am so teachable. I am so prepared to learn from those who are in higher levels of that journey than I am. But in this third dimension, I can assure you that I know that I've been to the top of that frequency, and I don't want to remain at the top of that frequency. I want to step over and be at the lowest point of the fifth dimensional frequency because I know that I do not know what that's going to be like. But I do know that it is based on my acceptance that I am the creator of my reality and I want to create as God intends for me to create a happy dream. So, with that, I conclude today. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties. This is fun. I get to call somebody at Zoom. I get to make a new friend today. But ultimately, I want you to know that I absolutely adore you. I so appreciate everybody who's been coming. And some of you have been here in these episodes since the very beginning, almost 189 today. And I have mentioned before that I'm going to create the Awareness Academy classroom where I'm going to be teaching lots of classes. I'm going to fill up my schedule with classes. So I'm going to do a membership for people who want to come in there, take specific topics, take certain things from the course and immerse ourselves in a class for that specific topic. Because there are so many that really want to be in community and have somebody, have a group, have a community that holds them accountable because they want to walk the talk. They're more committed to liberation than they are to being right. This is not going to be a group that's going to appeal to anybody who wants to be right about what's wrong in the world. This is a group that it wants to be right about letting go of righteousness. So I'll share more of that as it gets developed. Is coming together slowly but surely, but I will put more of that out by April. I will have that sometime at least mid-April. I'll be able to launch that membership group. And that's really what I'm going to be focusing a lot more of my time because I can help so many more people when we come in community, but in a teaching classroom so that there's dialogue, not this where I'm transmitting what's coming through me, but more of a dialogue. So look for that. Does anybody have anything you want to share? Unmute yourselves. Otherwise, thank you for being here. And thank you to everybody who's going to watch this. If you appreciate what is shared here, please like it and share it and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you all so much. Love you all. Bye-bye.